Hello and welcome to the Film Angle. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kris.
And today we are going to do something a little different compared to the last few episodes. We are going to be doing a ranking, a top 10 ranking. What is the ranking, I hear you ask? We are ranking the 2023 Best Picture nominees for the Oscars. So this is our Oscar episode this year, ranking these 10 films that have been nominated and being able to discuss them that way and kind of, give our thoughts on, the Academy Awards.
Yeah, so March 12th is the Academy Awards for 2023. We have a lot of really big movies this year. I think every sort of last 5 years, especially during the COVID period, we've had a couple of really good sort of shining stars in the Best Picture nominee category. But I think this year, is probably the most competitive I have seen in some time. And there's a real mixture of film and representation here. Some really exciting films that come from more of an indie background. We have international picks, and we have some movies from really experienced auteurs like Spielberg. So yeah, this is really interesting. I mean, this is a year where even Avatar: The Way of Water breaks into the list, and
Yes.
I'm really interested to see where you rank your top 10 Best Picture nominees. We haven't conversed about this yet. We've kind of kept our list secret to each other, so it'll be interesting to see if we're on the same page or whether or not we have completely idea what a good movie is or what what isn't.
Yes, yeah. And I think, I don't know about how you rank these, Kris, but I rank them in terms of like how much I enjoyed them, not in or how much I think they're gonna like. Is my number one the film that I think's gonna win the Oscar? I don't know. It's a bit up in the air though, like you said this year. Like there's a good mix of films and a lot more kind of mainstream fun films as well. You mentioned Avatar. There's Elvis, Top Gun, Maverick, and the indie kind of phenomenon. Everything Everywhere All at Once. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. You can't really call it because if it goes to the film that many people think it might, that's a bit of a deviation from the Oscars' usual kind of voting record. They don't usually go for something so different.
Not to say that every film that's on this Best Picture nominee is exactly what my top 10 of the year, the last movie year, would be.
No.
This is the Oscars at the end of the day. We're kind of self-aware. Take it with a pinch of salt. It is what it is. But, I am proud of the Academy for actually, for once, kind of putting an interesting mix into the bag here. There's possibly one or two head scratchers on this list that we're talking about today that I'll share with you as we get in, and I'm sure you'll have one or two that you don't completely are on board with either. But for the majority here, I find it really hard, at least from number 5 to number 1, to really kind of shuffle them around. And on a different day, they could be moved. So yeah, pretty impressive stuff overall.
Nice. Well, let's get into it then, shall we?
Absolutely.
Let's go for it with our number 10 ranking. My number 10 film, Kris. So I don't know. I'll go for it. My number 10 film, Kris.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I know what it's going to be.
Okay. And you have to tell me. I guess I'll say it, then you say it, and then if they're the same film, then we can just chat about it. And if they're not, then I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go along.
Absolutely.
My number 10 film is Women Talking.
I am in agreement.
Excellent. So this is one of the... Basically, we'd pretty much seen all the Oscar films up until kind of February. The only ones we were missing were Women Talking and Triangle of Sadness, which are both films that we've seen within the last week and a bit.
Done some catching up.
Women Talking looked interested, sounded interesting, and then I watched it, and it really was not for me. To begin with, the color grading on it is pretty ugly. As much as it has quite an interesting premise at the start, you soon realize very early on that this is going to be what it says on the poster. Women talking, and that's not a problem. just checking out that that's not the problem that it's women, but it's the fact that we do not move from this barn, rarely at all, and the discourse that is going on is very obviously topical, powerful, but it doesn't sound much more than the kind of average Twitter discourse, but maybe less
Mm.
less heated. Uh, is that how you feel, Chris?
Yeah, I think you and I are going to find not much to disagree with on this one. The first thing that comes to mind, you're right. Whenever you know, put on this film is the cinematography and the color grading is it is a bit mystifying in a way. You understand that this is dealing with a heavy issue. You know, we're talking about oppression of women in a sort of closed off society, but and the color grading and the grayness is supposed to reflect that. But to what effect? I mean, that only goes so far. I mean, the movie is just not very nice to look at. I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of a problem. You know, you can do gritty and downplayed, or even use black and white photography to a beautiful degree to really showcase your subject matter. But this kind of seemed like it was trying to cash in on that sort of Terrence Malick sort of aesthetic without really kind of any thought behind it. This is adapted from a recently released novel, and it does have that feeling also of a stage play. Where it kind of reminded me a lot of when we were discussing about The Whale, where this is kind of a courtroom experience where it's set in a barn, and it's the whole story revolves around the aftermath of a rape incident in a small sort of religious community in somewhere in middle America. The aftermath is that one of these men is discovered after a rape incident. These incidents have been happening for years to the women and haven't been reported on. They are arrested, the men involved. All the other men involved in the community are sent to rush with them to the police station to get their bail. And they'll be gone for a 48-hour period. And in this period, the women have to decide whether they stay and fight the men for whenever they come back and kind of see where it's all going to go. They can stay put and do nothing, or they can take the children and run away and try to find a better life where they don't have to be oppressed by these men. So it sounds like it's a heavy subject, and it sounds like it's going to have a lot of emotional heft in there. But yeah, it just had that sort of stagey quality to it where it had that Oscar sort of. I don't like to use the buzzword because it's very charged, but it's the Oscar bait sort of performances were kind of overwrought and sort of kind of measured in a weird way. I think they kind of go for it. There's weird intersections of humor in here that kind of take away any emotional build that was potentially there to happen. But yeah, I was a bit struggling with the performances here, considering that this cast is stacked with players like Jesse Buckley or Claire Foy and Rooney Mara. I thought we were going to get a powerhouse of emotion here, and to be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed on that front.
yeah, I completely agree, and it is interesting that they've basically taken like the best actress, best supporting actress nominations of the last couple years, and almost made this kind of ensemble movie. And for
Yeah,
me, it felt like the subject's so heavy, but the way it's lit and framed feels like you said, Oscar bait. It feels like an SNL sketch. It feels like a parody of a film that's trying to be a deep Oscar film, and
that's
that's just from a visual point of view.
yeah,
But then you have this very, heavy dialogue, but it nothing's catching, nothing's gripping me. It reminded me of student films that I've even made.
right,
Where
okay,
take a deep
that's
subject, you have somebody on one side of the discourse, you have somebody on the other, you have this kind of academic discussion, get the brain juices flowing, all that
mhm,
kind of stuff. And I just felt like, yeah, I could have seen myself making this film, not in any way as good, even though I know we
yeah.
disliked it, but I could have seen this narrative playing out in a student film somewhere. And yeah, I'm surprised I'm surprised it's got a nomination here, because but
Yeah,
but if it this feels like old school Oscars taking the the low hanging fruit films
Sure.
that are made just for them. I don't know.
Uh,
It's a shame because it's got such a great cast.
yes, I know we're spending a lot of time talking about this, but this is only one of the films that we haven't talked about in the podcast so far.
Yes.
But the movie, it opens up and we are straight into the courtroom drama aspect of it already. We haven't had any time to sort of build up a picture of what this community looks like, what time period it's set in, what exactly are the challenges the women are facing on a daily basis. We don't even get much of a face to any of the men. The only man that we really get to see the face of is August, who's played by Ben Whishaw. He kind of plays as their sort of, he's their mediator, note taker. He takes the minutes for their meetings, and he's kind of seen as the anti, everything that's going on wrong with their community. He is like a pillar, a beacon
The
that the
the
men
not
should.
all men figure.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
they say that in the film, and I did kind of cringe a little bit
Yeah.
when they're
I mean,
like,
it's
"Not
obvious.
all
Yeah.
men." And,
That's the thing.
man, but that's what made me feel like it was just, like, social media discourse, like,
Mhm.
things like that. I don't know.
And it's that conceit that sounds really good whenever you put it into a novel that could work really really well and has that sort of bookish quality to it, but whenever you that does that translate to the screen, I don't think it does. It kind of comes across as a little bit artificial, and that's kind of the main problem with women talking for me. And just like, there's no tension. This film should be running on time. It establishes there's a 48-hour period where these women need to really like knuckle down and decide where their future is going, where their children's future is going. And I didn't have any sense of time. I had no sense of tension. Um, it was just, there were so many obvious missed opportunities that were just kind of ultimately kind of annoying.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I really did enjoy the first scene where they really kind of break the film down into the simplicity of the three choices, and I
Hmm.
was on board. I wasn't on board with the visuals, but I was on board from that moment. But as the film went on, it really dragged, and just it didn't take me long with it. But yeah, number 10, Women Talking. Don't think it'll
But
get the Oscar either way. I think
we are in the minority though, Alex. Like, I'm
it's
seeing.
true.
I was really excited to catch up with this film because I heard so many good things about it. A lot of people are really taken by it. I'd be interested to hear what listeners would think about the film, whether it caught them on a different level. But yeah, don't take our word for it. We're obviously monstrously wrong. But no, I felt that I had a good mind frame going into this movie, and it just didn't reach the expectations that I think Sarah Polley had the intention of.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's rating quite highly on things like Letterbox and stuff like that. Which is why I find it even more interesting that we've both come out with this with a similar opinion. Um, yeah, interesting. It's probably one of those films you got to find out for yourself. Don't just
Mhm.
take it from us. Should we get on to our number 9 pick, Chris?
Yeah, this kind of proves that recency bias isn't really a thing with me. Um,
Okay.
this the other film, my number 9 is Triangle of Sadness,
Oh,
which is the other film that I caught up with in the last week. Now, this was a movie of experiences. There are some moments in here that are actually kind of near highlights of the year in terms of, what they're trying to say. They're in terms of its entertainment as well. I mean, it's kind of really insane stuff going on here. I mean, I don't even need to dance around the extended boat sick scene, which a lot of people have already kind of cited. This is the most noteworthy part of the movie. It's the only time I've ever watched a movie actually where I have felt nauseous watching a scene. There is a
yeah.
real, yeah. I'm serious. I've never watched a movie that I'm not. It's like, it's a movie. My eyes can distinguish with the screen whether blood's real, whether sick is real. But the way that the camera, cinematography, and just the pure amount of body fluids that are on display in
Yeah.
this movie, I actually felt a little bit turned.
There is stuff coming out of every hole at one point.
Sometimes all at once, yeah, both at the same time.
Exactly, and yeah, it's pretty disgusting. Now, Triangle of Sadness is not my number 9. My number 9 is actually Avatar: The Way of Water, but I will
Okay.
chat with you a little bit about Triangle of Sadness because it does come up a lot higher in my list.
Mhm.
The spoilers, it's not number one. Triangle of Sadness, I did like. I thought it was a very good looking film. Great
Mm.
performances. I laughed quite a bit. I think it was pretty funny. Director, I don't know how you pronounce his name. Ruben Ostlund or Oostland maybe.
Yeah, I will go with that. I think that sounds about right. Yeah.
Which one?
Both.
Okay, Ostlund Oostland. I think he's known for his kind of like quite dark societal comedies. I think this
Mhm.
film maybe was trying to go down the route of Parasite, where and it does to an extent. It's trying to say something about society, the gap between rich and poor, and how those power dynamics have played out over time, and how they can switch around in an instant. Um,
Sure.
when push comes to shove. The only issue I take with that is that this film is not very subtle about it. It really hits you over the head with those themes. You know
Mhm.
exactly what it's going for. And it's quite a long film that is kind of repeating the same message constantly. But I had a
Yeah.
lot of fun, and it was a gorgeous film to watch. Apart from the extended vomit and diarrhea scene, uh, but I was still kind of chuckling to myself throughout that as well. I liked it. I liked it. Solid for me, but I'm surprised it's so far down in your list. For me, Avatar: Way of Water. If we move on to my number 9 for a second, I think is a film that I'm also quite surprised is on this list,
Mm.
considering we had qu- quite a lot of good films come out last year. I know it's an epic, and I know that it's got incredible visual effects and should definitely be nominated for that, and is and will win, no doubt. It's insane how they've done some of that. But for me, it's not a great film. It is
Right.
average to mediocre at best. And in terms of my entertainment, everything above this film, I think I enjoyed more.
So you're talking about Triangle Sadness, right?
No, Avatar: Way of Water.
Avatar: The Way of Water. Um, I see the difference. I'm going to talk about Triangle Sadness first. Why I put it on as number 9. Um, the reason why I had this a bit lower than Avatar was I did enjoy the extremities. I enjoyed the provocation. Yes, the message is kind of overblown in moments. The performances are really, really interesting in this. But the thing is about the movie, it feels like three different movies in one. It has a clear three thirds that are completely, geographically as well, that they're mapped out in a certain way. You've got the incident with Yaya and her boyfriend Carl. The first third of the movie, the interesting discussions about sexual identity and gender roles, and then we move on to the yacht in the middle section, and then the island at the end where everything kind of gets upended, and like you said, the power dynamic shift, and that was kind of the most interesting part of the movie for me. But the problem is those three sections feel so disjointed. It didn't feel like a coherent experience for me. It felt like there was 30 minutes that could have been taken off this movie very, very easily. You're right, the message was heard loud and clear, and but I don't know if there's really much else to say. You kind of leave at the end of the movie. It's kind of, I turned to me and Lauren watched this together, and it was kind of hard to kind of gather up our thoughts. We both knew the experience that we had. It was interesting. The visuals will stay. It was a beautiful looking movie, apart from that section. But it's I don't know if it's got anything that kind of got under my skin. I don't know if that's a little bit of, we talk about Marvel fatigue. We're getting a little bit of the rich people satire fatigue as
Yeah.
well. We've had a lot of that in the past year. So that's kind of why I had it there. I still really like the movie though, Alex. I don't want you to get me wrong. I thought it was a
Oh
solid
no,
experience.
no.
Avatar
I get that. I get that.
Avatar: The Way of Water. I would have probably agreed with you come Christmas time whenever this movie came out. I was really excited for this movie to come out. I'm a big fan of James Cameron. Avatar, I see it for what it is. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I do think it is a really interesting piece of, world building. And I think it has, Damon Chazelle and Babylon even thought that it was worthy of showing in a montage of how cinema has evolved over the years. But as the months go by, I kind of want to return to this world of Pandora. I kind of think I took for granted how amazing the world building is in Avatar: The Way of Water. You're right. You know, it seems shallow to kind of dwell on the technicalities, but the technicalities are just insane. Especially when we were talking about something like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania that we talked about last week. Although I enjoyed the world of that movie, it doesn't compare to the vision that James Cameron has conjured on the screen here. And there are moments of, emotion. There are moments of, real sort of stakes. There, it perhaps is bloated in its runtime. I think that goes without saying. It's 3 hours, 10 minutes long, but it's really exciting to see a movie like this, a genuine popcorn movie, to be on the Best Picture nominees list. So that's why I had a little bit higher, as that's kind of my excitement to see this sort of film.
There you go. There you go. Shall we move on to our number eights?
Mm-hmm.
So my number eight film is Elvis. What is yours, Chris?
It was Avatar: The Way of Water. So I would like to hear what you thought about Elvis.
Okay, well, I'm a pretty big fan of Elvis. I had a lot of fun with it. It's got a brilliant standout performance from Austin Butler.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different film. It's maximalism to its kind of finest degree. We really are taking on a roller coaster of the extreme here, and I think it plays well. It's not really the, even though it has very biopicy tropes to it, it's not really the story of
Mm-hmm.
Elvis the man. It's the story of Elvis the myth, and Baz Luhrmann has really kind of leaned into that, and everything is excess. Even the camera, the way it moves is excess. The editing is excess. The
Mm-hmm.
music is excess. I think maybe that there are times when it really needs to slow down, and it doesn't allow you to kind of emotionally connect. This is very much the comic strip version of Elvis's life, and we're not pausing for a minute, and that's fine. I like that. That's the film it is. That's great. But yeah, it was a good film to me. It wasn't elevated to an amazing film that could win an Oscar. But I had fun with it. I had fun with it.
Yeah, I always get really excited when Baz Luhrmann comes back onto the scene. He is a Marmite filmmaker. I've always been, whenever I was kind of going through my early teenage years and kind of going through my sort of high school back in Northern Ireland. I was a big fan of his work. Moulin Rouge was one of those movies. Whenever you're a 13-year old hopeless romantic, and maximalism is kind of your thing. It kind of worked for me, especially in Gatsby. I thought his recreation of those sort of legendary parties and that era of 1920s New York was really, really well depicted. So I knew there would be no better sort of director to take on an individual like Elvis, because you're right, he lived a lifestyle of maximalism, and also the iconography that surrounded Elvis, just like a figure like John Wayne or Marilyn Monroe. These are almost mythical creatures in American sort of modern pop history. So it's really hard to kind of tackle them with a sort of seriousness, um, because I feel we are so distorted by our vision of how they've been presented to us our whole lives, that it's really hard to kind of put a serious touch on them. So it's I think it's the right way to approach this movie. I think anybody else would have maybe have missed the mark, but I thought there was emotion here. I think it kind of, the whole point of it is, yes, Elvis wasn't a saint. I think it takes its time to actually acknowledge that he was a bit black and white. Well, he was a bit gray at times, in terms of his behavior, especially in his, he ignored the women in his family were probably sidelined to his sort of his naivety and his approach to fame. But by the end of the movie, I think it has a straight down the middle look at him, and you have this appreciation just for how talented and how much of a one off he was. And by the end of the credits, when he sings Unchained Melody in that famous sort of clip of him, that was his last performance weeks before he died. That's that's a YouTube video I watch probably once a year. Um, that I think it earned its emotion there. But yeah, it's not perfect. I think it's got some like questionable moments. I think, a lot of people diss the Tom Hanks performance. I actually think the Tom Hanks Tom Parker performance is a lot of fun and one of the strengths of the movie.
I think
Um,
it works in this version of the film.
sure.
I didn't mind it. I think if it had been a different type of film, maybe I would have found it too caricatured. But the whole film's a caricature,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
It
And
works.
the accent that he does is not even a trait of the real Tom Parker's. It was really just a choice, but it kind of just really works because we got to vilify this guy, and the movie's not telling you to take it as a tried and tested true life retelling of the story of Elvis Presley. It's mythical in its own right, just like the famous pop singer.
Nice, nice. Obviously, we've spoken at length about Avatar, so
Mm.
shall we move on to number seven, or did you want to add?
No, no. My number seven
Yeah.
is All Quiet on the Western Front. We spoke about a couple of weeks ago.
Perfect, because my number seven is also All Quiet on the Western Front.
I think a movie that we both again appreciated, really, really enjoyed,
Solid, solid.
especially solid. Yeah, I think it nails the harrowing imagery of war. I think maybe that's because we've had a bit of a saturation of World War One movies in the last couple of years. Um, Although this has its standout moments and it has its own unique perspective, I'm not sure it really has anything else to say that I haven't sort of seen in war films before. And that sounds like that's an unfortunate sort of thing to say. It's not the film's fault that war films have been kind of one of the most tried and tested genres in history and have been since ever since film has been created. But compared to so many exciting films that are on this list today that we'll be getting into, it just didn't do enough to kind of set itself apart from them. I appreciate this movie. I think it does the thing very, very well. But yeah, it's not one of my favorites.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that. It's a solid film, emotional in its visuals, maybe not so much with its characters.
Mm,
Some interesting stuff going on. I really enjoyed as a difficult world, but I liked I liked the
yeah,
film. I liked it. There's not much more to say. In terms of the films put before it, I think it is a better put together film. Films that I've put on the list before this one.
sure.
Um, but yeah, it's not wow. It's not wowing. It's not a
Yeah,
5-star film.
I
It's not a 5-star film.
I do find it really interesting how it has managed to propel itself to being the kind of awards darling of the year in terms of its nominations. We've seen it gain the most BAFTA and Oscar nominations, which
Yeah,
is
and
really strange for where, yeah,
when did
it's
this get
strange.
released on Netflix? Like,
It was,
I don't even remember any fanfare for this film. Like, it's almost garnered more of a
mm,
reputation as it goes on. I mean, and that's probably Netflix's fault. They're absolute shit at marketing their own films. But
mm. I don't know if was it released on Remembrance Day? I might have been. I think it was a November release. But it's strange as well. It's really hard. I think it's a movie. These type of movies, particularly war, tend to win a lot of public audience favor, and I think they were able to kind of channel that and market it to that type of audience, the people who subscribe to Netflix. And this is the sort of thing that despite it being in German language, this is the sort of thing they subscribe for on a Friday and Saturday night, particularly from people that individuals who aren't particularly well versed or cinephiles or claim to be. They tend to really go for this sort of thing, and I know a lot of them have really enjoyed All Quiet on the Western Front. But I think it's just interesting to where we are as a filmic society that the Academy has really went for this. There are so many more diverse and interesting and kind of new wave films that are on this list today that I'm surprised that they aren't leading the competition.
are you saying that maybe this is the Ford v Ferrari slot of 2023, the dad movie film. You've got to put
Oh,
one
come on.
dad
Not to,
movie
not
in
to
there.
insult any dads out there.
This is the dad movie. May I was going to say probably not my dad. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. I think the Oscars always do have an obligation to themselves, and I do feel like they do try to bring in the public audience a lot. You know, they need their views. They need people to be following and getting into film as well, and getting bums on seats. So they do like to kind of focus in around a movie that they think audiences will connect with. But then you think Top Gun Maverick, such a big hit, you know.
Oh, that's
Um,
the dad movie, and
that's the
that's not
dad.
my
That's the
dad
dad
movie as
movie. And
well.
you know what? That's like I think it's probably one of the best. Well, I don't want to spoil anything. It's on this list anyway. But All Quiet on
Yeah,
the Western Front, it's a solid experience. I'm a little bit scratching my head as to why it is, so revered. I don't think it's breaking new ground.
there we go. Number six. My number six film is Tar. What's yours?
My number 6 was Elvis.
There we go.
So,
I have put Tar in number six because, as we have spoken about on a previous episode, definitely go back and listen to that one. Very good episode.
mhm.
I am confused and conflicted with my feelings on this film because, on a surface level, and well, actually, more than a surface level, it's an amazing looking film. It's an
Mm.
incredible sounding looking film. I, it, I'm not a music composer. I'm not in that world, but it feels like
What?
you're watching a film that's very, very much for that audience. Like, it's so enveloped in that world and so articulate with it that you just like, did a music composer write this? Crazy to think that old Todd Fields isn't. But yeah, there is incredible scripts, incredible looking film. Does it come together in the end? I don't know. It's a very
Mm,
tricky one. I just Tar. I feel very conflicted about. After talking to you, I felt more positive. I think that's
okay.
why it's up higher on the list than some of these other films. But one thing's for sure: if it was me, Kate Blanchett would be winning Best Actress because I don't think there's a performance on this list quite like hers.
Well, I find it hard to disagree with you on that last point. Kate Blanchett is, for me, without a doubt, the one of the greatest performances of the last year. But I will save a little bit on Tar because it is a little bit higher
Yes.
on my list. Um, will we go on to number 5? I think 5. We're getting into the territory now of the movies I really, really, really liked, bar none of these, because I struggled with this. At least 2 to 5, I struggled to kind of jig them around because I think these are all great movies in their own right.
Go for it. Go for your number five then. Go on.
Well, my number 5 is The Fabelmans, which
That
I
is
would have.
lower. That is lower than I thought it would be for you,
Yeah,
Chris. That is that. Oh, I'm very
I
intrigued by
know.
your top five now.
It's hard because The Fabelmans was no secret to anybody who knows me. Was without a doubt my most anticipated movie. I will say this year because it did come out in the UK this year. So I'm so invested in Steven Spielberg. He's such an integral part to my childhood and my love for film, just like so many other millions of people. I probably sound, very very common by saying that, but his talent as a filmmaker is just completely, you can't deny how how much he has done for the industry. You're talking everything from Jurassic Park to Indiana Jones. Whose childhood wasn't in some way sort of affected by his film. So to actually get a movie about his background, about his the origin of the Spielberg, maybe this film should be called. I thought it was incredibly moving. I think it is such a tender piece of work. I think it is. Yeah, I think it's a reason why Spielberg. It's the only movie of Spielberg's to ever actually be submitted into a film festival. It definitely has more of that quality to it. You're getting an art house film, but with the sheen and the polish of a Steven Spielberg experience. I thought it was great. The performances were brilliant. Michelle Williams kind of knocked me out the water. I know you weren't as keen on her performance, but I just thought it was such a great experience. It's so hard to not put this one higher. It really, really was. It stuck with me a lot. I'm really looking forward to revisiting it. But there are so many other great movies to talk about in this list.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the Fabelmans too much because it does come up in my list. But
Hmm.
yeah, big fan of the film, as you'll find out later. My number five film was actually Triangle of Sadness. I
About a
just
lot higher. Yeah.
yeah, maybe it was recency bias. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I had fun with it, and I think it's flawed, but maybe I'd take out the first part of the film, but the everything from the yacht onwards. But even the first part's pretty good. I really like the uncomfortable argument. It's difficult.
It's
I
very
was very
engaging.
I was a big fan of the film, and I really liked the guy who played the model boyfriend.
Yes.
I thought he was
Harris
great.
Dickinson. He was probably the
Yeah,
standout for me as well.
I don't think I've seen him in anything before. I've just had a
I
quick look. I've definitely seen him in something because he's actually in. I've seen three films with him in before. Not
there you go.
recognized him in any of them, but I thought I don't know. There was something really engaging about his character. I thought he was a really standout performance in that film.
I think he does a really
Um,
good job of making you like him at the beginning of the movie and be on his side, and then completely hate him by the end of the movie.
yeah, I don't know if I was ever fully on board with him.
I find I thought he had his finger on a pulse at the beginning, and then that kind
Yes,
of was quickly going away once you kind of
yeah,
learned a little bit more about him.
it's true. That's true. Let's move on to number four then. My number four film on here is The Banshees of Inisherin. Um,
As is my.
Excellent. Big fan of the film. Probably one of the kind of best all rounders here. Like a pretty solid film in the visuals, the acting, the sound, the story, the writing. Just a solid all rounder film here. Um,
Mm.
Interesting, funny, and like you said, probably has a lot more going on under the surface as it's this kind of allegory for Irish politics that completely goes over my head. But
Mm.
I had fun with the film.
Yeah, I think it couldn't have came at a better time for Martin McDonagh. This film, I think, I've always enjoyed his movies. I'm a big fan, especially like many people of In Bruges, but I don't think he's ever been a creature of subtlety. He is always done with like outlandish black humor, married in with sort of dark sort of emotional plot lines. But I think The Banshees is his real sort of his his first sort of subtle film that kind of lets the script do the work. And there's a lot of very clever writing in this. You can tell that McDonagh is such a skilled playwright. That is his background. He is a Broadway award-winning playwright in his own history. But I think the performances are what really makes this thing sell. I think Colin Farrell is just absolutely so likable as
So
a
good,
character.
yeah.
I really think that 2022 really was his year. I think you take his performances from the Batman as the Penguin, as in after Yang, as his sort of passion for tea making made me want to start brewing my own tea. I never had that sort of want or desire before. And then in Banshees, it's just a completely, I'm so proud of Colin, an Irish actor, and just to see how far he's went, and such a great
Oh,
performance. And he's so funny. He is so sweet in this role, and and it's a movie about that. There's layers to people that you didn't initially suspect, and you know, there's nothing wrong with being a nice person. And I think that's such a, there's so much more going on in this movie. There's a lot of different messages, but that's something that really hit home for me. And I thought it was a really great piece of work. And I think it's definitely worthy of revisits. And I've only seen it the once, but I know I'm going to love it even more the second time. Hence why it's so high up on my list.
definitely. I agree with everything you said. And just so Brendan Gleeson doesn't feel left out, he's also very good
Oh,
in it as well.
hey, that Brendan Gleeson being good in a movie goes without saying.
But
He's
I think
half the yeah
that's the same with
with Colin Farrell.
Colin Farrell. That's the same with Colin Farrell for me
Well, I
now.
think
Please
everybody
edit
was so
that pause.
excited. You know what everybody loves about In Bruges is their dynamic and how chalk and cheese they are, both
Yeah.
visually and in terms of like what their preoccupations are, where they are in their lives, and those characters. And I think everybody saw this as a reunion film for both of them. You've got two of the strongest, funniest, and most thoughtful Irish actors that are kind of alive today, and they're back on the big screen in probably one of the best written Irish films in recent years. So, and yeah, I'm so excited to see that even overseas that people are really, really excited about this. The US audience seems to be, every sort of review, whether that's on YouTube or written review online, everybody's loving this thing, and it's so good to see.
Yeah, and I won't lie, it's probably my favourite Martin McDonagh film since In Bruges. I've not really been a massive fan of his work since. So yeah, for me, this is almost like a return to form as well. But I realise I'm very much in the minority there. I think a lot of love for Three Billboards out there. Number three films.
Number three, you're going to disagree with me here. I am a really big fan of Tar. I think it's a I think it's a really interesting movie, and it's the kind of movie that a director like Todd Field comes out of hiding after about 15 years to make a movie like this. There is so much thought put into this thing, and it relies so heavily on a powerhouse performance like Kate Blanchett's in this, that if anybody else was to conquer this script or take a hold on this character, I think it could have went into that SNL caricature sort of realm, because it takes a lot of confidence. This movie is kind of like it's the film version of a dagger. It is so precise. It's always attacking. It is always in conflict. It's paranoid with itself. The character of Lydia Tarr is so interesting. I mean, she is a minefield of the good in people and the bad, and it's a look at people in power, especially in the arts, which is really true to our time, especially in the past sort of 5 or so years, where we really are discussing the Me Too movement and looking back at our historical figures, cancel culture. And I think it addresses them in a not in a I know it all sort of way, but it sparks interesting conversation, and it has grey views on everything. And I think it's a movie that I will be revisiting a lot. I thought it was a really hypnotic sort of experience, and even though it's over 2.5 hours long, I'm still thinking about it now. I think there's some images and some of the cinematography and use of music. It's so hard not to get it out of your head. And I think, I've always been a fan of Kate Blanchett, but she really just takes it home. I mean, only she can have the audacity to wear her hair like that, to wear outfits of this magnitude, and prance around bossing people what to do and kind of destroying people's lives, and with such command that you're like, yeah, I completely buy this person. I think it's a one of a kind movie. Yeah, I struggle to put it anywhere lower than my number three.
I agree mostly with you, Chris. Mainly about performances and stuff like that. I definitely wasn't won over as much by Tar, and it's really interesting to hear just how won over you were by it. I was not expecting to see it above the Fabelmans on this list, but I think that goes to show just how much you kind of
Me
invested
neither.
into this film, because I know how much you love Fabelmans as well. So my number three choice is probably the film that's gonna win, and I would be
Okay.
happy if it went if it won. I would a lot of these films. Actually, no, top four. I'd be very happy if any of them won. Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't be upset. No.
everything, everywhere, all at once. It is kind of the film that seemingly came out of nowhere, has taken the world by storm. So many people love it. So many people have really kind of emotionally connected to this film. I am somebody who really liked it. I don't think I was swept up in the emotion of it as much as some people, but I can see why it is deserving of a place on this list. And if it was to win, which it probably will, I'd be more than happy to see something so creative and different and diverse and genre specific as well. I think
Hmm.
I think it'd be a really interesting win for the Oscars. But yeah, everything everywhere all at once is my number three.
Yeah, it's really hard for me. It is. I'm not gonna. Well, it's a bit of a spoiler already, but it is my number one movie of the year. In terms of the Best Picture nominees, I think it is just everything you've said already. It is just an absolute maddening cataclysm of ideas and creativity. But it isn't just those technicalities. It isn't just, isn't it wonderful that they've put so much on the screen? It is tied down by really an emotional plot line with the family dynamic, and it marries quite an ensemble of characters together to really make them all sing off the same hymn sheet and make you connect with a story that actually is quite thoughtful and really kind of tugs on the heartstrings. By the end of it, you really want to see this family and these characters do well regardless of what timeline they're from. um I can't say that for Marvel as a parallel to in terms of multiverse movies. It's really cool. Really, way to the Daniels to show Marvel how it's done with a percentage of the budget to boot as well.
Marvel definitely did not see Everything Everywhere All at Once becoming the multiverse film of the year. There is no way they saw that one coming. So, but yeah, no, good for the Daniels,
Oh
the
yeah,
directors of the film.
I,
Really happy for them and how well this is kind of how well this has gone down with the general audiences.
yeah, I was surprised to actually see it so high on your list, actually, Alex, because I knew you really, really liked it, but I didn't know you liked it this much. So I'm actually pretty pleased to see it this high on your list. I think it's a remarkable film. I think if this movie year wasn't so stacked, I haven't rewatched anything really because we've had so much to catch up on. Any other year where it was a little bit more stagnant, especially over COVID, if this was released, I probably would have already seen this movie about 10 times. There is so much to pick up on this, especially if you're an avid movie fan. He's going to pick up all those little nuggets of information. I'm sure there's loads of things that I missed as I'm still kind of going on my cinematic journey, and I will be for some time. There is so much to love in this film. And yeah, I think the performances are great. I wouldn't be upset to see this baby win the top prize at the end of it. I think it'd be a really cool sort of precedent set for the Academy, going a little bit offbeat and showing that no matter what your background is, no matter what your subject is in terms of your film content, or whether it's a really big budget or whether it's really small budget, you can win an Academy Award for Best Picture if your movie is damn good enough and connects with people as much as this movie does.
Definitely, definitely, and yeah, for you, Chris, is this maybe one of the first years where the film that you want to win is probably going to be the film that wins?
It probably is. I mean, I'm probably jinxing it right now. But it was a really toss up between the two. Like you said, your number two was Everything Everywhere All at Once. My number two actually was Top Gun Maverick, and I was really between the two. I think, you know, tell me at the start of the year that Top Gun Maverick was going to be a Best Picture nominee. I know Tom Cruise
No,
these days. He doesn't pick projects lightly. He throws himself into things. And we know his work with Christopher McQuarrie on the Mission Impossible movies is just so. I'm in love with the Mission Impossible movies. I can't wait for Dead Reckoning. But Top Gun, it has its place in terms of the 80s pantheon, and we all know that it's this cheesy men's health magazine stretched into a movie for an hour and a half, and it's a lot of fun. But is it the quality that this sequel manages to be? This is a legacy sequel that manages to be so much better than the first, and but without making the first movie look worse, it manages to kind of honor the first movie as well as be better. It's just so incredible, the achievement that they've done in terms of marrying the special effects, the cockpit effects that are in this movie, where they actually are really in these fighter jets, and you have a real sense of scope of where they are. The tension is really well earned. It's kind of like Mad Max that came out a few years ago. George Miller was really able to establish a real sense of threat and tangible earthy grittiness to this world because he used real vehicles, and this movie does the same thing. And it just proves that it makes so much more of a difference whenever you put people in real sort of stake in situations. And Tom Cruise is always showing us that it's worth going the extra mile to really make that shot matter, put yourself in real danger. I'm sorry that I'm actually permitting that you should put yourself in danger for a film, but he proves that in terms of action scenes, it really makes a difference. And this movie is great. I think it's just the ultimate popcorn film. It came exactly the right time, post COVID, where everybody needed a little bit of a lift up, and it's a movie that everybody can enjoy. It shows that art doesn't need to be slow, methodic, or profound. It can be big popcorn entertainment, and I was really on board for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to mess up the order of things here. We've messed it up a little bit anyway. My number one film is Top Gun Maverick. It's not my number two. My number two is The Fabelmans, but I'll get to that in a minute. Just because we're on the Top Gun hype. Top Gun is excellent. It's redefining what blockbuster cinema is, what it was, and what it should be. And although, okay, is it the most kind of simple story? Is it? But it's done so well, and it is the most entertaining film of the year for me. It's the film I connected with the most. I think I'm looking at all these films on this list, and I'm thinking the only film that I shed a tear to this year was Top Gun Maverick. It hits every emotional point. It is epic and sweeping and soaring. I like you said, it improves on the original. I was not a original Top Gun fan, and it just holds quite an emotional place in my heart now. This film was just absolutely excellent, and just yeah,
Mm,
it was. If you're gonna award a film, then I think this film is cinema. It is the definition of
sure.
entertaining blockbuster cinema. And yeah, I wasn't expecting to see it on the nominations. Even after watching it, I was not expecting it to see it on the nominations. But hell, if it won, I would be happy. It is quite the ride. It is quite the ride.
It
My
really
number
is.
two film, Fablemans. We've spoken at length about the Fablemans, and I agreed with everything that you said. Still surprised that it's your number five, Chris. A massive kind of emotional connection to this film. Being filmmakers and film fans. Well, I'm not really a filmmaker. I wanted to be a filmmaker at one point. We're both big film
There's
fans.
time.
The
There's time.
podcast is scratching that film itch that I don't have as much as I used to. But this film was all about being creative, but at the same time, it wasn't really about that. It was about Spielberg's family, and he really opened up to us.
Yeah.
Somebody who's kind of, his films have been with us from the day we were born, essentially. Every year, every other year, there's a Spielberg film, and a lot of them, especially early on, were the films that we grew up with. So,
Mm.
yeah,
I think you can
to
always tie his movies to like a family event. Whether it's Christmas or New Year's or like Easter. Anytime families are on and people put a channel on to put a movie on the background, it would always be a Spielberg movie. It was always Christmas time. E.T. always comes to mind. Every time it was Christmas time, there was always E.T. on in the background. So it's like somebody who helped rear you as a child as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and for him to be this open and honest with his own story and his own background,
Very
yeah,
honest, surprisingly so. Yeah.
it was yeah, it was beautiful. It's a really really beautiful film, and yeah, it's number two. It's number two for me. So
Can I can I put a little bit of a spanner in the works now? We've had
yeah, yeah.
our top 10. Quite interesting to see that they're both very very similar lists. Actually, in fact, apart from one or two mixing and matching a little bit, I'm sure for a lot of other people they'll have it in a completely different order. But if you were to hypothetically pick a movie that didn't get nominated this year for Best Picture, what
Oh
would you have put in this list? What would you have put in as the Best Picture winner for this year if it was The
well,
World of Alex?
as a nominee or as a winner?
Nominee or winner? What do you think
I mean,
should
obviously,
be
my favorite
in
film.
this list?
My favorite film of last year was obviously The Worst Person in the World, but I think because of festival screenings and stuff, I don't think it would be eligible.
Hmm.
So obviously my second favorite's in there, which was Top Gun Maverick. But do you know what? One of the most powerful, interesting films of the year was not on there, and very much deserving so. It did get a Best Actor nod, which is great, but for the amount of love that this film has got, and surprise and emotion and connection, After Sun should be on that list
Yes.
easily. Um, how After Sun's not on there, and films like Avatar: Way of Water are, I have no idea.
Yes. Okay, that makes my pick of Avatar to be as high on the list as it is. That kind of dilutes it a little bit because I completely agree with you. I've got not much more to chime in on there. If it was my list, too, After Sun, without a doubt, it is my favorite film of the last year, and yeah, I'm happy that it got a Best Actor nomination anyway because that was an undeniable performance. I just wanted to shine light on it because I think if anybody's listening to this and maybe just following the Best Picture nominees and maybe not venturing much outside of that list, please seek out a movie like After Sun because it needs all the attention that it deserves.
Excellent. Well, let's wrap it up. But with one final question, I guess.
Hmm.
When this episode comes out, we're not very far away from the Oscars actually happening. Who's your pick for best film? Like, who do you think is actually going to win it?
Mm. It is really, really hard. I think Academy is so based on momentum. But we are getting to that period now in the last sort of few weeks, gearing up towards it. I do think Everything Everywhere All at Once will win it, and I do think it deserves it as well.
Yep, them. I feel that I feel the same way. I feel the same way, and I'd be very happy to see it. So fingers crossed. I guess will we know by the next episode? No, because I think we record before the Oscars. The next episode, so episode after that, we'll know and we'll let you know our thoughts. But we're
See
gonna
how
wrap
wrong
up.
we got it.
Yeah, but we'll wrap up this episode now. We hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure to go follow us on our Instagram and our TikTok. Who knows? Maybe we'll be talking about the Oscars there, and you'll get a quick snapshot of our thoughts going forward before the next episode after the next releases. But
Something like that.
this has been the Film Angle for this week. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chris.
Have a good night, people.
Bye.